Somebody said, what are you protesting about? And the answer is, what have you got? And that was really the attitude at the time.
When the university opened in 1965, it needed to have, almost overnight, a cadre of senior academics. To put it bluntly, if you were going to start teaching physics, chemistry, theology, history, English, you needed professors in those subjects.
I came to the university in 1965 with my husband, Harry Bloom, who helped set up the law department. I was made the first information officer of the University of Kent, and I did some magazines called FUSS, Forum for University Staff and Students, and I always felt it was very, very important with the university in its early days, but particularly to bring in the town and gown, and particularly because it had made such an impact on Canterbury, having the university here. There was a sort of general feeling of gaiety, and this was a lovely experience for the university, which otherwise was having a fair amount of protest because everybody was struggling with the interdisciplinary aspect of the university. It was very experimental. They wanted all the faculties to flow into each other. Nobody really knew how this was going to happen. And we had all sorts of new staff coming all with very different ideas.
The university was run by very senior academics who had an international reputation. And I came in 1968 as, how old was I then? I was 27. So for me, those senior academics were gods, even though I was on the academic staff. That's how it was.
There was a real struggle going on between capital and workers at that point in time, which impacted on the students and the way they thought about the world. And they did see themselves as very much allied to the working class and being part of that struggle. I was in Keynes for the first year. I was resident in Keynes. Keynes was really the focus of a lot of activity. I remember the junior common room and the bar was just continually littered with leaflets and flyers for hustings, for elections, for coaches going to demonstrations, for various debates, for the women's movement, for all kinds of things. There was always something you could join or get involved in Keynes.
So by the time you got to the late 60s, 1970, the phenomenon of the politicisation of the student body was well established. And it came here to the University of Kent almost immediately.
Looking back on it, it was more of a cultural, in fact you could even demean it to be a fashionable climate, but the cultural climate was a political climate, so therefore we were protesting about everything all the time. And the famous occupation of 72, when somebody probably else has already told you, but the students occupied the building, and I was one of those people. Not necessarily proud of it today.
Reports came out that university authorities were keeping information on student records, student files, about political affiliation and political actions. So word spread around the campus that the University of Kent kept secret files on students which detailed any known political affiliation, any known political action. Now that was serious, and the students, in my view, were quite right to get worked up about it. And at first the university took a paternalistic attitude, falling back on, as I explained a moment ago, well, we are in loco parentis. It's not for you to ask us what information we've got on you. We are responsible for you in law. We can keep whatever information we want, which wasn't helpful because it was a real issue. But the Students' Union suddenly discovered the sit-in. And so student files became the subject of the first serious student protest. The whole building, of course, was under occupation because the students had commanded, they managed to keep pretty well every single room open. They set up, there were banners at the windows, there were enormous numbers of students all around here, with placards, down with the university, down with secret file. Should I say this? Yes, I will. For the sitting lasted for 2 weeks. The students occupied the whole of this bit of the campus for 2 weeks.
And it was something to do with student files at Essex. Have you heard about it? There were these rumours that there were all these secret student files at Essex University. It kicked off there, that we weren't allowed to see. And so I'm sure it was all perfectly innocent. But anyway, we made it into a great big thing. And we occupied one of the university buildings and wouldn't let anybody else in. And I can't remember which one it was now because it was so long ago. And we had rallies and speeches, and we got all sorts of very radical people down from London. And I remember somebody saying that democracy is never won by democratic means, and we all cheered and had a lovely time. And then it got to the Eastification, and we all went home, of course, so it sort of petered out. So I think in the end we got to see our files, and I think some of that, the kind of resistance to authority generally, the refusal to take the word of anybody for anything, always question everything, curiosity, Star Trek, to boldly go where no one went before, So I think that's still with me, really. And I learned it all here. So
I think that was what university was meant to be about. I mean, in those days, or that's especially those of us perhaps who came, I don't know, more from the social sciences, I don't know. But I think there was a general idea that universities were about critical thinking, about challenging the status quo, about thinking about new ways of doing things.
Well, I think students come to the university to protest, don't they, about life generally, And so I think that sort of thing is important in a university, that they are allowed to protest and things. And it was just the way they obviously conduct themselves. I think they felt that some of the protests, like when my husband was when staff were prevented in going into their buildings to teach, that wasn't acceptable. They were, they were almost manhandled, so that was too extreme.
Well, the big one was the Joe Cotter affair, where he was effectively discharged from the university by the humanities, the Dean of Humanities, I think it was, and that caused a major sit-in. This was in 73.
The other one a bit later was for a sort of rogue student who'd been off for a whole term, lived in London, was being sent down for this because he just hadn't been around. And there'd been a little commission of inquiry into his case, and it was agreed to be sent down. Joseph Cotter was his name. Anyway, because he was a friend of the powers that be in the student union, he got vigorously defended. They said this terrible injustice has been done to this student.
I can't remember which year it was, but it was about a guy called Joe Cotter. He was a student who'd been sent down. And I'm not sure exactly what the reason was. We thought it was because he hadn't attended lectures and seminars. But anyway, there was a massive sit-in. And I think it was the Senate building, I can't remember if it was the Senate building that they took over. And it was all very exciting, of course.
Basically, they were saying that they didn't follow the correct procedure to kick him out of the university, where the students were. And the sitting just went on and on, I can't remember how long for. It got bad enough that when I went to lectures, the the lecturing staff said, if you don't come out of the Cornwallis, I'm going to stop lecturing to you lot. So there was a big meeting, and I can't remember if it was in Elliot or Rutherford. Do we come out of the, do we stop the sitting or not? And the other problem that's happening with the third years, because I was in second, it would have impacted onto their finals. So there was a massive cohort of third year students there to say, come out, because I don't want my finals messed up.
The authorities have threatened to close the university down, and some of the teaching staff have stopped lecturing already. But then my comment here is, isn't it terrible that so few people can cause such a lot of trouble? So although I was obviously finding it really interesting, I was a bit concerned because I think I was one of the people that was in my final year.
Our union president at that time, John McGowan, gave quite a speech, and but in the end the vote went, you've got to come out of the Cornwallis. They'd recorded the whole meeting, and they then replayed the John McGowan speech, and it was quite an impressive speech. I was thinking, yeah, why did we come out? We shouldn't have come out. He was a very good speaker. I think the student union got quite a bill for the damage in the building. Joe Cotter got reinstated and passed his degree. There was a running joke that scientists have labs to do their practicals in. The Cornwallis is there for the social science and humanities to do their practicals in.
I actually covered in my Fuss magazine anything that was controversial. Yes, I got people to write about it and put it in the magazine. So I like to hear I was in favour of protest because or things that were wrong, because that's what the magazine was for, forum for university staff and students.
A university should be an open place where all ideas are debated and challenged and defended. And if that's done properly, eventually, in the long run, good ideas will survive and bad ideas will drop by the wayside.